In 1999, when I was working as a reporter for the Decatur Daily, I went to an event where the Sheriff Grady Rose, his son, needed bone marrow. When I was at the bone marrow drive covering it for the newspaper, the mother, Mrs. Rose, asked me to sign up. And I think it was 4 years later, I received a letter in the mail saying I was a potential match for a 5-year-old boy with acute lymphocytic leukemia. And at that point, I had to decide whether or not, to donate bone marrow. Of course, I did. A year after I gave my bone marrow, I got pregnant with Sarah. And when Sarah turned 4, she was diagnosed with the same type of cancer. I'm a mother of 3 children. My middle child, Sarah, was diagnosed with leukemia at age 4 in 2004. And at that time, I started noticing that, one of our friends had a child with leukemia in Fairhope. And another child that was in Sarah's play group when she was a baby, there's 2 children in there. So I'm thinking, that's really odd that we know 2 kids right here in this general, vicinity that have cancer, and then it turned out that she was part of a childhood cancer cluster. A cluster is defined as a higher than expected number of cases in a defined area of a specific type of cancer. So under the CDC's definition, it has to be usually one type of cancer that is caused by the same thing. So it's kind of difficult to have a cluster designation, as you will, because they can always say, well, you don't have all the same type of cancer, We are here to talk about cancer in Baldwin County and children with cancer in Baldwin County. All right, this all started not just with Sarah's diagnosis, but when Sarah was diagnosed, there were 4 other children in the Eastern Shore area with leukemia. So I'm a former reporter, and my instincts were like, this is not right. And at the time, there was a website up for the state health department, and it showed that Baldwin County had all these drastic jumps. It was like from 7 cases of leukemia in 2000 to 17 in 2001.
Baldwin County has a long agricultural history, whereas across the bay, Mobile County has been a heavily industrialized county and ranked in the top 5 for many years in the 90s for industrial emissions of all kinds of chemical pollutants to air and water.
And there were 53 chemical smokestacks in Mobile County. Every one of them releasing who knows what to the air. Just tons and tons was coming out of paper mills, out of refineries, everything just belching into the sky from this area in the late 90s. Back then, we saw the toxic release inventory numbers that Mobile County was number 5 for toxics released to the air, land, and water that caused cancer. We were number 1 for toxics released that caused reproductive disorders and developmental disorders. You name it, we were in the top 10. What was happening in Mobile was absolutely impacting Baldwin County. And we all wrap around this one bay. There's no big dividing line down the center that says pollution, you're going to stay over here and not go over there.
So anyway, I got the state involved and said, hey, you guys need to come down here. You need to look at this, check it out. And we started an investigation, and then they just abruptly stopped and didn't really give us a reason why I didn't answer our phone calls. So that was the end of that for then. And then around 2008, another mom contacted them and said, I'm going to get another investigation going. And I said, well, they're not going to do anything. So you're wasting your time. But I'll support you. So we got it going again. They interviewed 56 of 90 people I had on the list. It was shortly after the state health department concluded their second investigation into rare cancer in Baldwin County. They pulled out of the investigation saying that you did have a childhood cancer cluster, and we do see some elevations, but they don't look at certain cancers that are very rare. They don't count those. They had their own inadequacies to deal with. They didn't have the funding, the protocols, the right questionnaires, or the personnel to tackle something like this.
When Leslie started focusing on the idea that there was a cancer cluster, I was doing a lot of reporting with the state regarding mercury exposure in other places, and I saw the deficiencies in how the state looked at pollution in areas. You know, looking at an area by zip code, for instance, it just can mask almost anything. If you have a cluster of people who are affected by 2 or 3 drinking wells that may be contaminated with something, looking at the whole zip code isn't going to show that. It's going to, you know, you're going to miss it. You're going to skim right over it. So, you know, when Leslie started focusing in on this stuff, I realized there was plenty of room for the officials to miss whatever she might be seeing on the ground in terms of, you know, number of people in a real small town.
Instead of just accepting that, I came together with Debbie Quinn, who's a former city councilwoman for City of Fairhope, who's a former nurse, and we formed a nonprofit agency. She helped me put that together. We got a board of directors, a really great group of people, and we decided that we were going to do our own thing and just try to partner with universities for research. If we're going to talk about cancer in Baldwin County and childhood cancer, I want as many parents as I can to be aware of what we're trying to do, be aware of how many other kids there are out there, so we can present a unified force.
Well, you might want to see this. Just a picture of her medicines and her. She had me take a picture of her with her IV.
And she made this?
Mm-hmm. This was her. We're the parents of Carlin Alexis Davis. She was diagnosed with DIPG, which is diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma, which is a brain tumor, in August of 2012. You know, Carlin wanted to know why she was in the hospital, and I wouldn't tell her she had a brain tumor and that most likely she was going to die, because I knew it would take everything from her and she wouldn't fight.
We woke up this morning and Patrick's legs are hurting, so it's going to be a challenging morning. We're getting there. Got to go get labs this morning.
I was diagnosed back in January of last year. The weird thing is, my best friend, she came down with lymphoma. She came down with lymphoma in December, right before I came down with ALL. And I didn't even know about it until I went to the hospital and seen her there. And I didn't even recognize her. She had no hair at all, and it bothered me.
Leslie and I are Facebook friends, and just because my child had cancer, she contacted me because she saw, I don't know, somebody told her about us or something like that at the hospital. You know, she's trying to bring awareness to Baldwin County so that everybody can take a look at it and see that the numbers here in Baldwin County are really high.
I started collecting names back in 2005 when Sarah was part of an initial cancer cluster, and just kind of kept hearing about people with cancer and had them in a big database on my computer. And so the result was a very big spreadsheet of names, you know, just all different kinds of cancers, ages, different adults and children.
There's a bunch of, mostly when I'm in there, there's a bunch of little kids in there, and I'm not sure. Makes me feel real bad for them, and I hope they make it through it too. Hopefully I do too, but much rather them make it than me.
So I found out about Kenna a few months ago, and was very shocked and unsettled to learn that she had apparently been diagnosed at about 6 months of age with uterine cancer, and which is extremely rare. Just met the family at the birthday party, her 1-year-old birthday party this weekend, and she's just a beautiful, adorable little baby that, it's just heartbreaking to think that a child that little having to go through chemo, surgeries, radiation, and things of that nature. It's not right. Something's wrong with the situation.
St. Jude gives you, and of course it's an option if you want to partake in it, the legacy beads. And each, like if you go to lab, they give you, if you got a good poke or a bad poke with a needle, you got a bead for that. There was a bead for every appointment. There's a picture of Carlin and I at the doctor's office. Told her she had to fight.
I had a good friend of mine tell me, he's an environmentalist, but he actually asked about, brought up the question about the iron actually in the pipes as far as the our water supply.
And I know Carlin loved to swim, and we stayed at the river a lot. We did go to the beach, but not as often as the river, and you second guess that, did she spend too much time in the water? Was it something she was eating? And you just wonder how come we're not sick? Where did it come from? I don't understand, but I want to. I want to know. I want it stopped.
Back in 2008, at about the same time the state broke away from us, we got a study going with the University of Arizona on tree coring. And those are those guys over there on the bottom right. Tree coring. They drill into the trees and they look for toxins in the tree rings, mainly heavy metals. This is one of the trees that we cored back in 2008 when the researchers from University of Arizona were here. They took a small metal instrument, drilled into the tree, and pulled out like a straw-like section of the tree, and you could see all the little tree rings. And they took it back to the lab in Arizona and analyzed it for heavy metals. And this may have been one of the 3 trees of interest, because there was one on the Fairhope Beach where we are now that had high levels of tungsten, increased levels of this heavy metal. In order for them to confirm their results, they needed to come back again and again. It was like $10,000 every time they come back, and I didn't know where I was going to get $10,000. So we decided to shift our focus and look at the water.
If I were to try and figure out what might be causing, cancers in this area, the first thing I would look at is the drinking water, because everybody here drinks water that comes out of the ground, and that water is coming from aquifers about 150 feet deep. The rainwater that falls here, a lot of it flows into the ground, and it takes about 50 years to get down 150 feet to that aquifer. So the fertilizers we were using 50 years ago is what's getting into the aquifer now. And they're starting to see a lot of high levels of radionuclides in the drinking water, and those are radioactive particles associated with these fertilizers. When you look at the number of people here with these rare cancers and rare diseases, it certainly has me alarmed. I've lived here for 15 years. I certainly worry about that, and I think she may be onto something. More digging might show what exactly it is.
I would like to really find out what we're drinking, make sure our aquifers are safe. We do have some issues with nitrate in our water that are pretty well documented, but we also want to look at emerging environmental contaminants. We want to look at a number of things that could potentially be in our water system.
losing a child is it's undescribable, you know, to what you go through. And still to this day, it's that.
A piece of you is missing. You know, I see all her school friends, and I think, what would Carlin be doing? Would she be on her phone texting, or
What would she look like?
would she be getting pretty to go to a dance, or would she call everybody city slickers? You know, I don't know.
All these kids count. They all matter. All the parents matter, and I want to live here forever. I mean, I want my kids to come back here and raise their children here. But if there's something going on in our environment that is harming our children in some way, I sure as heck want to know. I want to find that out, and I think everybody should want to find that out.
We've got significant problems, and it does not take a massive investment. It takes the community being involved and aware, and then telling the elected officials, telling the industries themselves, telling our agencies to make a difference, that this is important to us and we want to see a change.
Only through sharing our stories will we have a unique opportunity to increase awareness and obtain some solid environmental studies, which is the goal. Our children, our families are worth it.